It's time to join Montana's very own and your voice for agriculture, Talkin' Ag Lane Nordland, for today's Lanecast.
Everybody, thanks for joining the agriculture conversation on the Lanecast Ag Podcast. I'm Lane Nordland. Our topic of discussion today are electronic animal ID tags for the livestock industry. It's a big discussion topic on social media and down at the local cafe and out in the countryside. And joining us here today is immediate past president of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association and South Dakota Cattlemen, Mr. Todd Wilkinson, joining us here today. And Todd, a lot of the country is receiving quite a bit of snow and moisture here at the end of this week. I know you were in Denver at the NCBA office, and they're getting hammered with some weather. But how are things in your neck of the woods there in South Dakota today?
It's a beautiful sunny day, and my son, who is knee-deep in calving, is telling me that his dad should not wish for moisture at this point. So I have to tell you the conditions here are great, and I did escape Denver before we got a foot of snow. So,
well, that's good. Up here in north central Montana, we didn't get much in terms of precipitation. We're kind of in a little area that didn't get all the wet snow, but we'll take that as a godsend as calves are hitting the ground here as well. But Todd, obviously there's a lot going on out in the countryside. Producers are very busy, and it's been quite the process watching Congress try to work through getting spending bills pushed through, and of course a delay in the farm bill. And those spending bills weren't even for fiscal year 25. It was for this fiscal year. They weren't even passed. So obviously there's a lot that was included for agriculture and to keep the Department of Agriculture going. But a big topic at our local stockyards, the cafe, and especially on social media is funding for electronic ear tags out there too. $15 million appropriated in that bill. And again, with that, there's a lot of confusion. There's some frustration because of maybe that confusion and maybe some information being spread out there. But what exactly is this funding, and how is it important to cattle producers? And what are some of the things you would just like to point out about it today?
Well, let's start with where we're at. So USDA has got their proposed rule out there, right? And that's talking about mandatory EID for a certain segment. I'm going to reference it largely to breeding livestock that are some of the rodeo animals, and then dairy is largely impacted by this too. But so if we're going to get a mandate, if that's what they're going to put on us, the producer says, why do I have to shoulder all that burden myself? Because it's largely the cow-calf guy that's going to get hit with that. So we've been advocating, if this is the direction that things are going to go, give us some relief for the producers. And it was awesome to come through that markup and get that passed and see $15 million be allocated towards the tags and the infrastructure costs, so the cow-calf guy doesn't have to handle all of that. Is it 100%? Maybe we got a ways to go, but we've also got some indications from USDA that they are going to be able to allocate some of their current resources. So I think this is a huge win for the cow-calf producer. If we're going to protect the animal herd with traceability, it's way easier for the producer to get on the bandwagon with that if they don't have to handle all the costs themselves. So you picked up which on a topic, Lane, I think which is awesome. The fact that we did get in there and we were able to lobby and gets that degree of funding, and I'm optimistic on what this does for the future of the industry.
Now, there's a lot of folks saying that this traceability is going to give the government the ability to track your cattle out in the pasture, and there's a lot of concerns with that, especially if we don't know the full language or we haven't read it. But with that, Todd, I guess can you maybe clear up that really this is a change in just the technology being used to track, say, females that you're going to keep for breeding, or those intact females that are going to be crossing state lines, or rodeo cattle, as you said. So really, it's an update in technology from, say, what the Bangs tag is, the metal clip that we put in every fall when we're deciding if we're going to keep some heifers and get them Bangs vaccinated. Is that the correct view of that?
Yeah, so let's start with what is out there. Everything's that they've already talking about are already mandatory. So this is not a change that way. You touched on it. This is taking the Bangs tag, and switching it from that metal clip that we're also used to, and switching that so that it would be an EID tag. It does nothing more than that, is switch the means of identification. So I'm sure you've been shoot side lots of times and have had to try and read a Bangs tag. It is not an easy process, and you're logging all of that down. So if you're talking about animal disease traceability, you're gonna be able to wand that EID button and automatically have that unique 15-digit code. So does it do anything more than that? No, it puts in an electronic form already what they have. So when people come out and make it sound like the sky is falling with this change, you're taking a Bangs tag and you're putting an EID button in it. It's as simple as that. And when people say this is now a mandatory thing, it's already mandatory with the Bangs tag in my country and in your country. So we're not putting an additional level on there. Now, there was discussion at our convention most recently about advancing that beyond. Some of the affiliates wanted to do more than that. They have a right to put forward their proposal. But what we settled on, what the producers settled on, was literally taking that Bangs tag and converting it into an EID tag. And the thing that I want to get across to people is what we're talking about is protecting the herd. This is protecting the herd. And if you have an outbreak, whether it's foot and mouth disease, whether it's tuberculosis, what you name it, you don't want your herd impounded and prohibited from moving any longer than it has to be. In the current rule, we're going to have an immediate shutdown if we have a foot and mouth outbreak. Everything goes to all stop for a minimum of 72 hours. That's going to make the Holcomb plant fire look like a cakewalk when you can't deliver cattle to a packer, when you can't move them around. I mean, understand that they have to protect the herd, and that's part of what this is to do, to protect the herd. But the biggest thing is to allow the information from your state vet to be shared with another state vet. So Montana can share with South Dakota or Wyoming at the speed of commerce. We do everything with these goofy cell phones that we all have in our pocket, and we can transmit data back and forth very quickly. That EID tag is allowing to just do that same process. What is hilarious to me, and it is so frustrating because of some of the social media discussions out there. I heard last year that the reason that the Chinese were flying that balloon over Montana was because they were trying to read the EID tags across on all the cattle out in the pasture. Give me a break. I mean, that is so far from reality. The data points that you're collecting, you've already provided all of that if you've signed up for a CFAP payment during COVID. A whole lot more data went there than the 4 data points that you're dealing with an EID button. They're not going to give that information to the public. It can't go anywhere. It does not go to the IRS. I mean, I've heard all sorts of wild accusations being made out here. I literally think that a lot of those people are either ill-informed, or what they're trying to do is prevent rapid disease protection, because it's not a matter of if this is going to happen. It is going to happen. I'm going to go talk to the Australian Cattlemen's Association, who has had electronic identification for years, and they're on an island, for goodness sake, and they're trying to protect their herd. And yet we have a border that's wide open on the southern part, and we don't think that we're exposed. Look to poultry and look to pork. and let's be proactive.
You bring up just the traceability there in Australia. Obviously, they're at the forefront of foot and mouth disease in that area right there, with it being in several island nations close to Australia. But before we even jump to that, there's other industries, other livestock industries that are maybe ahead of the cattle front on that. Dairy already has implemented quite a few of this type of traceability on disease. Could that advancement, especially as we see more dairy on Angus on dairy, how could that impact cow-calf guys out there with just how advanced they are on that front?
Well, dairy is light years ahead of the beef side. They're way more proactive, and of course, it's a little easier. I mean, you're in a dairy setting, but this rule is going to impact all of their animals all the way down, and dairy on beef is a big deal. I mean, and it's growing bigger and bigger, and that's a great segment of the industry. A lot of that, from 15 years ago, I routinely saw dairy animals coming in $15, $18 a hundredweight under what our operations beef animals are. Now they've advanced that so much more with dairy on beef in the market that they've got. Great for them. But they've already complied with all of this EID stuff, so they're going to be able to go into this quicker. And we need to be able to follow the lead here. And I guess I would use dairy as a little bit of an example to say the sky didn't fall for the dairy industry, and they've been doing this for a long time.
It's just interesting. Literally, as you and I are talking, my friend Joe Gill, he's the immediate past president of the National Association of Farm Broadcasting, a broadcaster out of Minnesota, and he just literally sent me what the local market there in Minnesota where he lives, and they're selling 300 to 400 weight Holstein steers, $292 to $346, 4 to 6 weight Holstein steers, $244 to $309. Man, that's some pretty impressive numbers for calves that used to maybe bring 10, 30, $40.
yeah, and it has changed. But you correctly identified that dairy really has been doing all of this. They're way further ahead than we have. Well, pork is further along than we are. It's not to give up my information to the government. I mean, that's not the design of this. It's to protect, the way I view it, I'm trying to protect my herd. And if there's an outbreak in Louisiana or California or wherever, I don't want my herd shut down. I mean, I want to be able to know that the areas that aren't impacted can still work at the speed of commerce, and we can all continue the wonderful industry that we're involved in. But we can't continue to sit there and just say we don't want to do anything, and the way it's been is good enough. Now, I am going to tell you that I am 100% with the idea that producer's got the choice. That producer is for by and large, a lot of us, the rule that's coming out by USDA isn't going to affect a lot of operations, and because they're not selling breeding livestock and they're not crossing state lines. So a lot of them are not going to see that. But I challenge the producer to say, don't you want to do something on a voluntary basis to be proactive, to help protect the herd? And I think that, think of it on a proactive basis, but think of it on a voluntary basis. I buy insurance. If I'm going to get in my pickup and I'm going to clock a deer when I go home, hopefully I'm going to get paid from my insurance company for the damage that deer did. If I can do something that reduce the risk to my cattle, so they're not exposed to a potential $228 billion economic hit, I'm gonna do that. And I'd rather do it on my terms than do it on the government's terms.
No, I know down there at the Cattle Industry Convention, a lot of the discussions and the policy creation was set, and a lot of it talk on social media right now is that NCBA is pushing for mandatory EIDs. Is that the position, or what is the official NCBA policy book on that?
Not only is it not the position, it has never been the position. You know, and and if somebody wants to challenge me on that, I helped write the comments that we submitted on the rule going into USDA. And I will tell you, you can go right in there and see where our comments say voluntary participation. Now, there are certainly a number of state organizations that want to move towards mandatory, but the way we adopt it is it's whatever the producers come together and adopt as our policy. As an officer, I follow the policy that is adopted on the grassroots level. And our policy right now is we're advocating that the industry move this forward, and that we don't have to rely upon the government to do it. Let's not be a Canada where they had to do this because of BSE, because they absolutely had to in order to get back in the market share. What your listeners and viewers also have to understand is if they say this has no effect on me, it's not going to be any big deal, realize as soon as we get a foot and mouth outbreak in the United States, what immediately is going to happen is we lose Japan, China, Korea. We lose all of our biggest export markets. And that's not a statement that's just being made up. That's reality. That's what our trade agreements say. So if we're going to take that big of an impact, and we're going to take all that export money out of the equation, we're just going to kill the industry. Let's do it on our terms. Let's do it on a voluntary basis. Let's do it with the producers leading the charge, rather than some yo-ho in Washington, D.C. trying to tell me I have to do this.
Now, my father-in-law and I were just looking at some replacement heifers to potentially buy the other day, and we're sitting there at the cafe talking, and we brought up the cow that stole Christmas there in 2003, and that case, bovine spongiform encephalopathy of that cow that originated in Canada. It disrupted the markets, as you mentioned, billions of dollars of lost opportunities for nearly 20 years in a lot of those key Asian markets that truly just got open in the last 5 to 10 years. So as we look at this as herd health, I guess, how is that important when we're looking at just trying to be, because I think traceability folks are scared of that term. You know, we don't want people spying on us. We don't want people to have our information. But at the end of the day, it's just having a source for veterinarians and animal health officials to find that information and go throughout that process of just trying to track down herds or possible disease.
Yeah, and really, who has your Bangs tag information right now, right? It's not going to be any different. I trust my folks in the state veterinary office in South Dakota. They do a top-notch job, but their ability to communicate at the speed of commerce to Kentucky or a Tennessee or wherever else, cattle are on the road all the time. We don't live in an isolated little bucket. I buy a lot of Montana calves and buy a lot of North Dakota calves, and they come back into our operation, and so I'm crossing that line back and forth. Cattle are on the road, and anybody in the industry understands that. Because of that, what's coming up from Texas or what's coming up from Kansas or going down, vice versa, if it gets a disease with it, it's going to go across this country like just like lightning. And this is not, it's not a nose-to-nose contact. It's not where the cattle have to be, along the same fence line. Part of this is airborne. Look what happened in Great Britain. So when you talk about who has the information, if you already trust your state vets and those officials, and again, this has nothing to do with doing away with brands. This has nothing to do with proof of ownership. This is for animal disease traceability. And if you trust those folks, those are the folks that are going to have access to this information, not the IRS or anybody or the EPA or anybody like that. The people that are going to have access to this information are only the authorized people that need this in order to protect our herd for traceability purposes for disease. And that's the part that we're missing in this whole social media discussion out there. People got to look at what it does. And your point, I'm going to echo it again, Lane. You're replacing a Bangs tag with an EID button. You're not doing anything else in this rule.
And with that, obviously, that as you mentioned, that 15 million is to go into help create infrastructure and pay for these tags. Because, as you mentioned, producers shouldn't have to foot the bill for that, and that's the opinion of NCBA.
Absolutely. And the other part of this equation that we can't forget is the livestock markets, because they're the pinch point in this deal. It's one thing for me when we're working our calves and we're tagging them. That's not that difficult for us to do. We've been doing EID buttons. I did age and source back after the BSE thing. There was money in it. So we turned our operation, all the calves we were buying, we were doing age and source because the producer was getting a financial benefit. That's part of the equation, I hope. But what we're doing it is for the disease part. But again, echo back to where this all started. Nobody's trying to track data that they're not entitled to. We just need to focus on what the rule really does. Forget the crap that you're reading on the internet, because frankly, a lot of it is not fact-based. NCBA is for the producer to make this choice and not get shouldered by the whole financial hit, because you're already going to take the labor. And now you're putting the tag in. That vet's normally coming to be the one out there putting that brucellosis tag in. Now they're going to switch to an EID button. But the message we're trying to send to the industry and to most particularly to the Beltway in Washington, D.C. is don't expect the producer to handle all this, and certainly don't dump all of this on the markets, because the livestock markets, my goodness, as busy as those guys are on sale day, to dump another thing that they have to comply with without giving them some help is simply not reasonable. We got to make sure that the livestock markets, because they are going to be the pinch point, and we got to provide them some help.
Now, Todd, also this week it was announced a rule out by USDA on the updating the product of the USA for meat and poultry, and it's not a lot when I can be on air and say that NCBA, US Cattlemen's, and RCAF USA are applauding the same issue or this rule per se for that product of the USA. A lot of conversations on our social media pages too, just based on the comments that we actually interviewed the Secretary of Agriculture down in Scottsdale this week at the Farmers Union Convention on the topic. But when we're looking at that, this is just another side of the conversations of just new rules coming out. How does this product of the USA label change now for our audience that isn't familiar with how that product of the USA label used to be implemented?
Well, I had a friend from Georgia that sent me a deal earlier this week, and he had a picture of meat, and not frozen, by the way, fresh meat, and it said Brazil, and that surprised me a little bit, because frankly, our opinion is Brazil shouldn't be getting that meat in the United States in the first place. But that's a different topic, and I'll get off my soapbox on that. What this label does is it clearly indicates that if you're going to label that as a product of the United States, it's got to be born, raised, fed, and harvested in the United States. So we don't have any Ecuadorian or meat coming in from someplace else that's being mislabeled. So it clearly differentiates our product and probably puts out there that the consuming public will know that this is a product of the United States. And that we identified this, oh goodness, how many years ago has it been now? 3, 4, 5 maybe. The years kind of go by on me a little bit. And we went to USDA with this back then and said, hey, let's make sure that if somebody's going to put a label on there, let's going to make sure that it's clearly tells them where the product came from in all facets.
Now, Todd, with this, obviously, this is voluntary, a part of that rule. A lot
It
of
is.
people have been asking, why is it not mandatory?
Well, in part because you're going to, do you want another government regulation? I mean, we're kind of back where you asked us where NCBA is on the traceability thing. That's why we're for it on a voluntary basis. The more that this can be done on the producer's terms, rather than the government making another rule and saying, here you go, you got to have this mandate. The other part of that is, if we make it a mandate, we're going to run smack dab into the MCOOL argument, and we've already lost that. I mean, we can debate MCOOL again and again, but until we get around that World Trade Organization the World Trade Organization ruling, we're on the bad side of that. So if we implement this on a mandatory basis, we're going to get hit with those sanctions. We already know Mexico and Canada have told us that they aren't ready to roll if that happens. So again, if we go with it on a voluntary basis, they can't say, well, they will say, but they can't make it stick that this is a government a mandate that's intentionally interfering with the markets. So I have to applaud Secretary Vilsack for getting it this way and getting it so that we don't run afoul of that potentially multi-billion dollar ruling that's sitting out there.
And obviously, there's a lot that will still continue to come out on the rule, and a lot of folks are asking, how do you track this? Then obviously, it would be you couldn't mix beef from Brazil and mix it into a burger patty and market it if the mixing took place in the United States and that was in the cooler there at the grocery store. You can't have Product of the USA on there. What happens if they do that? How does USDA enforce the rule, and how do they track that the cattle are in fact from the United States? These are just questions that I'm seeing online, and I know a lot is still yet to come out with this rule. But I guess what's your view on that?
Well, it's really no different than what it is right now. So if somebody's going to do if there's not a truth in labeling, it's a violation then. And it is going to be up to USDA to track that, and the other governmental entities that have to track that. It's not just USDA. APHIS is going to be involved in this. There's going to be other entities, but if you've went and you've chose to put that label on that package of meat that you're selling to the public, you're representing then that you're going to comply with all of the criteria that USDA has put in place for that. If you intentionally mislead that, if you're going to put grind in from Brazil, which happens, if you're going to take that grind product because we don't have enough of the lean product because we produce such a great product in the United States, if you're going to put that in there, then you're not going to put that label on there. And if you do put that label on there, then you're going to be exposed to both civil penalties and potentially some criminal penalties. We all know the traffic sign says 65 miles an hour or whatever it says, and you have to comply with that. And if you don't comply with it, that's your choice. If I'm going to go 80 mile an hour down the 65 mile an hour road, I'm going to get the ticket. It's going to be no different. If somebody's going to choose to violate that, then they should get the ramifications of what happens with that. We need to protect our product for the consumer. We enjoy an awesome reputation in the United States because we put a safe, wholesome product on the shelf, and the public trusts us. And USDA has earned that trust, so has America's producers. If somebody wants to go and follow that up, then I hope they come down on them like a ton of bricks.
Well, again, Todd Wilkinson joining us here today, immediate past president of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. We're talking quite a lot about those RFID tags for traceability. Of course, just an updated Bangs tag would be the best way to explain that, and touching there on that newly announced product of the USA rule. Todd, I know it's a busy day there in South Dakota. Just any last comments or thoughts you want to share with our audience here today?
No, let's just keep producing the great product that we're producing and keep the public's trust where it is. And don't believe everything you read on social media.
Well, again, Todd Wilkinson, thanks for joining us here today. And for more on Todd and all these policy priorities, if you're interested in reading more or reading the policy book of NCBA, just visit ncba.org. And with that, friends, we appreciate you taking the time to listen to our comments here today on the Lanecast Ag podcast and the video portion, of course. For more information, make sure and subscribe and listen to all that we have to say here on our podcast platforms. Until next time, I'm Lane Nordlund. Have a great day.
Thank you for tuning in to the Lanecast with Talkin' Ag, Lane Nordlund. For more on Lane, check out his Facebook page, Lane Nordlund Ag Broadcaster, and NordlundCommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lanecast on your Apple or Android devices. We look forward to joining you next time on the Lanecast.